So, we are going into FanFest. FanFest, for anybody that's not familiar with it, is a every other year build up to an expansion for Final Fantasy XIV. Going into those, Yoshida, Naoki Yoshida-san, has regularly, our director and producer, given interviews to a variety of outlets. And because this is a more digital fan fest, there can't be physical interviews with content creators. And he was able to give interviews, I'm guessing, over the past, probably when it seems like from outside statements, just from the way I read the Twitter posts, that the trivia game was probably pre-recorded, but we'll see. I haven't seen the event yet. And obviously those creators can't comment. But it sounds like at some point they've also gotten to record some interviews. And Mr. Haps got a chance. He apologized at the beginning of that his interview was not as up to date as when I'm sure the embargo said he could publish this as they build up to the event when they'd want the interviews to traditionally go live. So I wanted to talk today about kind of my response to both those interviews, and if nothing else, toss any awareness I can on this channel, any views this does get to both those interviews, because those interviews algorithmically aren't going to do horribly well on YouTube for how valuable the information they have is. They're not necessarily going to do as well as an episode of Mog Talk or a guide or something that Mr. Happy puts out. But they're really valuable. And when people ask questions about the game, just know that these are some really good questions. These are from two creators that have been covering the game a long time in a deep way. And as a result, they knew not to ask questions that couldn't be answered. But that didn't stop them from asking questions that have been asked in the past. Some of the questions they asked pick up off of questions we've covered in previous interviews, in previous expansions. And we got answers that were shockingly similar, but it's a way to check in and see if something's changed. And so I wanted to talk about kind of the things that jumped out to me, the things that stick in my mind. I don't have their stuff written down in front of me, so there's going to be questions that I missed. So by all means, please go watch those. There's probably stuff I missed as I relay this back to you. I will say, first of all, one of the most common questions is, can we get a small man hard mode piece of content? The most common comparison being Mythic Plus. Both of these creators did a good job of mentioning it in Final Fantasy terms, which I think is a politer way of asking than like how Brian and I have asked in the past, where we mention systems from other games to a creator and they're like, what am I supposed to, or a dev, and they're like, what am I supposed to do with that? So, because now I can't badmouth it because it's not my content if I don't like something about it. And Yoshi said that small man content isolates people. It's been something where he's afraid of building something that takes a ton of dev resources that only cater to a small number of people. And as the game gets bigger, it's invited in a lot of casual people with this meme about, have you tried the critically acclaimed Final Fantasy XIV? And so I think that we're not going to get small man content. I thought that coming out of the last media tour. I think that even more so now. We are getting new PvP that's going to be feast size or maybe slightly larger. But his fear is that anything smaller than the existing pieces of content in the game that is meant to be challenging, such as PvP or difficult PvE content, is that it puts a lot of pressure on each person to not make a mistake. He did, however, say if they were to do something like that, it would likely be something like a continuation on the Deep Dungeon system, which is the most difficult small man content currently available in the game, in my opinion. And so that in the context of the fact that in recent interviews he said they weren't aware of how many people said they'd missed Deep Dungeon, I expect an announcement on Deep Dungeon, or at least that they're trying to work on Deep Dungeon, which is a super loose statement that gives the ability to say, oh, sorry, didn't get there, as part of FanFest. So I would love to see Deep Dungeon at least mentioned. They've put a ton of love into side content this expansion. We got the rest of Blue Mage. We got updates to Triple Triad. So the question about, like, will we get updates to Chocobo Racing? It's like, well, no, but there's been a lot of investment in side content this expansion. When you talk about the jobs we got, when you talk about job balance, when you talk about past promises that have fallen through, like Eggy Glamours, a lot of that starts to lead into conversations about, A, what will the player base play? B, what will actually change the way players play? If I make every single scholar quit scholar to be a sage, We didn't actually do anything to healer queues. We didn't do anything to the meta. We could have just redesigned Scholar to be Sage, and we'd be in exactly the same spot. So when they add a job, it's a reveal into what they also wish the content could do differently. And so as they add a melee, you also notice, in my opinion, based around like these two interviews, that like the new Nier stuff and a lot of that, we start to move into things where like positionals are less of a thing. So they're trying to make melees be more accessible to people who've been ranged DPS. And I have some concerns about that because I think simplifying the game to the lowest common denominator is a direction that is important to have a little bit of, but like it seems to be the meta lately that if people can't do content, make it easier. And that doesn't give anywhere to grow. So I'm not sure I like that, but like as a non-melee DPS player, it doesn't directly affect me, so I'm not wildly passionate about it. It's interesting to see in the context of the new melee job. They can't reveal that much. In the context of Eggy Glamours, like at this point, Summoner has been called for such drastic changes that it does make sense that they're not going to invest in Eggy Glamour until they've nailed down Summoner. Because if Summoner drastically changes, it'd be pretty silly if they'd put a bunch of time and effort into anything that then had to be deleted or removed or adjusted in some way, when you could just instead say, let's rebuild it from the ground up and let's think about cosmetics from the beginning this time. I'd love to see cosmetics in the job animations and the spells across the board, at least on your screen, even if on other people's screens they look the same so they could recognize things, just for your own personal enjoyment. The ability for Black Mage ley lines to look different I think would be really neat. For there to be a cosmetic, because we'd still recognize it as ley lines, or maybe other people see it as just the regular ley lines and you see it as, you know, a job stone or a symbol representative of a primal or something like that. I think that these two interviews really reminded me, more so than any of the questions, what COVID has taught us about the developers of the games we play. Guild Wars 2 and World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV are the three games that I'm actively playing right now and looking at covering this year. I'd like to add ESO at some point. And they're the three games that I'm aware of a little bit of kind of what the plans are this year, what the pace is going to be. And in the past, when a game has controversy, players don't like something gets delayed because of a development leader quitting or unforeseen technical difficulties or lack of growth or too much growth or issues in other aspects of their company where the money has to be put somewhere else or whatever the issue may be. Geopolitical stuff where we talk about like, how does a company's relationship with countries like China affect game development? Like there are a lot. How do they treat their employees? What's going on with their relationships within certain, groups of people, whether that be based on gender, race, religion, creed, lifestyle. There's so much that goes into game development outside of game development that when a game developer is going through a controversy, each controversy is so unique that we have to ask ourselves, did they make the controversy? Is it their fault? And whether or not that's the case, is the way they're responding to it fair? And will I continue to support them? And so it's really hard to compare a controversy that Blizzard has, or Guild Wars has, or 14 has, or even something outside of the MMORPG space when we talk about things like Cyberpunk or Anthem. What they do when we see companies go in and have to fight the EU for surprise loot mechanics. It's really hard to picture how any other company would handle it. And so we tend to go, oh, well, they'd handle it way better because I like them. But we really don't know. We don't know. They might be just as inept, or maybe that really was the best way it could be dealt with, or I don't know. And so it's really hard to not have double standards. And COVID was unique in that it really didn't care. When it came to game development, it really didn't care how much money a studio had within reason. It really didn't care how many people worked for you within reason. It really didn't care where you were located in the world within reason. And like, yeah, no one of those is perfect, but like it, more so than anything else, equally applied to the entire genre. The entire genre had players that were stuck from home playing the game more, and devs that were stuck from home not making the content, and a gap. And so what do you do with that gap? And I think that the way that gap was handled and the way Yoshi P answered these questions was really insightful. It showed us a lot into how they deal with adversity. How do they deal with problems that they couldn't have seen coming or that they saw coming and they couldn't avoid? And if I take the answers to these questions and the actions they've taken over the last year to 2 years, it actually puts these very same questions 2 years ago in like a different light. It totally makes me look at them differently from different games. And I think that Yoshi P's team cut content from patches and delayed patches a little on the front end, but then kept us relatively on time through 5.4, 5.5, and going into 6.0, with 5.45 and 5.55 being fully loaded half patches. And they've had to cut huge pieces of content. And so to put it in WoW terms, it's really hard because it's not the same. WoW has, on the other hand, failed to put out 9.1, period. Guild Wars has just now begun their build towards End of Dragons, and the last living season, I'm not fully aware of it because I'm still a relatively new player, but it feels like people are complaining that it was light, and of course it's going to be light. So the question is, how light was it? How much was it not enough? And so seeing the way they respond to these tells me, okay, now based on that, how do they respond to their own adversity? And when I look back, 14 has a history of making patches repetitive and simplistic to keep them on time. WoW has a history of delaying them until players complain and then putting them out, and then if they don't like them, saying, well, we just wanted it out. And if they do like them, they go, well, wasn't it worth the wait? And so I think COVID showed us a lot about what like the chronic actions, like the long-term, incurable, permanent culture of these companies is. And that's really frustrating as a WoW player, but it's really something to be appreciative of as a 14 player. It reminds me a lot of like how tough of decisions. It's really easy to like a game when they walk into a boardroom and they go, which of these wonderful outcomes do we want? And it's really easy to hate a game developer when it's like, here's a good outcome, but we're going to be terrible people instead. But in reality, a lot of times these companies walk into a room and they say, we have a number of good things we want to achieve, and they all come with bad things. Which one am I going to pick? We have to increase the amount of money we make. Do we, because of what's going on with currency somewhere in the world, do we increase revenue in just that part of the world, or do we increase it across the board? We have to cut a piece of content to keep the patch on time. Do we delay the content, or do we cut part of it? In WoW terms, what if we were going into 9.2 right now, but 9.2 was going to release Mythic for Anathria, which means up until now we had still not gotten a Mythic raid for this expansion. Players would be pretty upset. What if we only got Mythic for half the bosses? Right? What if we trimmed the amount to keep 9.1 on time? That's really tough. It's not perfect. There's a lot of downside to it. But on the other side, what if to keep Ultimate, we were still in 5.3 or maybe in 5.4, and we didn't have a date for 5.5 and 6.0 had been postponed? But we got our Ultimate. It's coming with 9. It's coming with 5.5. It's coming. Instead, we delayed Island Sanctuary. We delayed Ultimate. We delayed housing out of this expansion. And some of those things I view as delays because they were spoken about in the media tour going into Shadowbringers. So I believe they were intended for this expansion. And the only reason they didn't have to apologize for delaying them is that they hadn't given us a date, as opposed to they did give us a time schedule for Ultimate. So they had to apologize when that was no longer true. Don't apologize for things that people don't know you did wrong. There's no need to draw attention to it. Just focus on the good and move on. And do better. And so I think that's been 14's mantra, at least from my perspective. So I just wanted to kind of talk about what these interviews meant to me. There's a lot of content in them. They're both full-fledged interviews. And they both have some really great questions in them that talk about everything from dungeon content to difficult content to the balance classes to glamours. and even a request for teasers. So I encourage you to go watch Mr. Happy's or Frosty from Mog Talk there. Links will be in the description below. And yeah, this is just me talking about gaming, kinda.